In this episode, we will explore the cycle of pushing and hustling, often followed by periods of crashing, as well as how this hurts both your business and your life. Because the thing is, continuing to push and hustle is not only bad for business, but it's actually bad for your health. By the end of our time together, you will be able to spot this ineffective pattern more quickly and be able to move out of it and do something more productive. So, if you're tired of the hustle, of pushing and crashing, and things still not working well, then this episode is for you. Be sure to listen. Welcome to the Self Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD-ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing, and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to unpack a common pattern of ADHD women entrepreneurs, and it's one I recently found myself cycling back into after a period of stress, having a lot on my plate, and then having a lot of extra emotional family things come onto my plate with the death of my grandma and the hospitalization of a beloved family member, and also some prearranged travel. So, this pattern I want to talk about that popped back up for me was really a response to try and help during a stressful time. And it's the pattern of pushing, also known as hustling, and then followed by crashing, which for me in this case meant being sick. So you may know that I was sick for several weeks with this cold that wouldn't go away, and finally admitted to myself, I think a week ago or more, that I actually was sick. And it was hard to admit because what it meant was acknowledging that I needed rest. And at a time when I didn't really feel like I had time to rest. Does that sound familiar? A lot of us get into this cycle of pushing because many of us learned to mask, to get by with our ADHD by overfunctioning and then through the corresponding high achievement. But the problem is, this doesn't work anymore in our adult lives, especially not as entrepreneurs, because our to do list never is done. There will always be more to do for your business. There will always be more to do for your clients. There will always be more to do in your life. And so if you keep pushing, trying to get that to-do list done, not only will you end up likely burned out or at least sick, you also will end up coming off as misaligned, out of your integrity. Because the thing is, when we push, we also dysregulate our nervous system. We lose our connection with our highest self, our self energy. And in that, we lose our ability to truly and authentically connect. This is tough because a lot of us are like, well, then how do I get stuff done if I don't push and push? I was on Instagram the other day and I saw a meme that I was like, oh, yeah, that resonates. It was like, I have to keep moving because if I stop moving, I'm afraid I'll stop doing what I need to do. Is that anyone else? I suspect the answer is like, oh my gosh, yes, that's why I push myself. And to me, I'm not saying we can't push ourselves at all, but that when we get to the place where we feel like we're running on a motor, where we're hustling, and we are tuning out the messages of our body to eat, to sleep, to rest, besides just sleeping, to really eat and drink enough water, that it is then that we are out of alignment and that whatever we are doing is going to be inefficient and unproductive, or at least not as productive and efficient as it would be if we took the time to take care of ourselves, slow down, and act with intention. Because the thing is, when our nervous system is dysregulated, the only thing our nervous system is prioritizing is survival. So when you are pushing and pushing and hustling, you are getting yourself into a place of fight or flight, followed by shutdown. Those are survival responses. And when you are in those responses, the only thing your brain, your body is concerned with is survival. So it's going to make it really hard for you to focus, to feel motivated to do the things that you need to do for your business. It's going to make it easier to get distracted on things that really don't matter. It's going to make it harder to actually have productive days where you really get stuff done and do it well. I don't know how many times during this period I started and restarted numerous YouTube videos because I knew what I wanted to say, but I was so out of alignment, I couldn't get myself to do it. Eventually, I was able to, but it took me first taking the time to rest. I would even say I had been pushing and pushing so much, I was nearing burnout. And the thing about burnout is when you are burned out, the only thing you can do to come back is nothing. You need to rest to recover from burnout. And you might not be fully burned out. I don't know that I was fully burned out, but I know I was teetering on the edge because I noticed it harder and harder to get out of bed. I noticed it harder and harder to read at night, something I love to do. And I noticed it was harder and harder to do the things in my business that are even fun for me. You might notice some of these things too. And we're going to talk about that as we talk about how to get ourselves out of this cycle. The first step is to become aware that you are even in it. Because the thing is this cycle is not healthy for us. And sure, I already mentioned short term. What I didn't get to yet is when we are chronically dysregulated, when we're chronically in our fight or flight response. Yeah, we may have some short term, like we might get sick, like a cold that doesn't go away. But long term, being in your fight or flight response takes a toll because you are not getting to be ventral vagal enough of the time. The ventral vagal response is where you are able to rest, digest, and connect. It's known as the social engagement system. We need to be in that system more often than not so our organs can do the work they have to do of taking care of our body. When we are chronically in our fight or flight or shutdown responses, our protective responses, our body isn't getting to do those things so that we end up sick, sometimes with chronic illness. And that's not to make it be a threat or anything like, if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to be sick, but it's a reality. It's a reality. We can do all kinds of great things to take care of ourselves. But when we get in this cycle of pushing and pushing, we're doing damage. And it's important to understand that over and above the problems the pushing and pushing creates in the short term, which is ineffective action, and we're less productive and less efficient and all those things, that we are wreaking havoc on our bodies for the long term. It's important to recognize that. Not to mention that we can feel more out of alignment. It can be harder for people to plug into us because we're not grounded in our highest energy. We're not grounded in ourself. And that can be harder for people to connect with. So, in order to step out of this cycle, in order to be able to connect with our intuition and align our actions with our intentions, we need to first have awareness that it's happening. And there can be many signs, and they may be unique to you, but there are some common ones. Like you might feel like you're running on a motor when you're doing this pushing and pushing. Like, I can't stop, I can't stop. Like you might notice it almost feels like you're running on a motor. You might notice yourself rushing or rushing more than usual. And then I don't know about you, but when I catch myself rushing, it's usually because I've broken something. I drop something and break it. The other day before I realized I was in this cycle, you know those Pyrex measuring cups? I use them to stir stuff in, but the Pyrex and I make my morning mocha with them, but the Pyrex measuring cups, I broke part of one, like a little piece chipped off, which they're supposed to be like unbreakable essentially, right? I mean, they're not, but so it's supposed to be somewhat indestructible. And I totally chipped off a giant piece of one. It'll still work, but it was because I was rushing. I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't being present enough uh, with what I was doing. And that will happen more and more when we're in this pushing and hustling cycle. You might notice that you're having a hard time getting yourself to do the things on your list because you're so distracted. You're like, oh, should I do this or should I do this? You might just feel generally more scattered or like there's these things that are genuinely important to do, but those aren't the things that you're able to get yourself to focus on. You might notice yourself getting sick like I did. Like maybe you have a cold that doesn't go away. And it's because it's not safe for your nervous system to rest, digest, and work through the immune responses required to fight whatever illness you've picked up. You might notice some sleep disturbance, like perhaps you're having a hard time sleeping, you have wild dreams. Those can all be indicators that it's time to slow down. You might also be doing things for comfort, like maybe eating for comfort or watching your comfort TV shows over and over, or binging Netflix or scrolling social media. Those are often signs that you're pushing too hard and that you're just needing a break. But the problem is those things like numbing out with social media and TV or binging Netflix or Hulu or whatever streaming you have are not actually ways that rest, that truly replenish you. They're just things you do to kind of numb out to get through the day. And so these can be some of the signs you'll see when you're in this pattern. One more that's coming to mind is emotional reactivity. So you might notice you're more sensitive. You might notice you get your feelings hurt more easily, or you might notice you're more irritable. So when you're noticing these things, oh, I'm in this cycle of ineffective action. I'm pushing and pushing, and there's going to be a crash unless I figure out to do something with this. Once you're aware, while you probably could just force yourself to slow down and be like, okay, I'm going to rest. That's it. I'm just going to do it. You could totally do that. Chances are that would work in the short term, but there's something underneath it that is continuing to get you into this cycle. There's something in you that's been triggered to put you back in this ineffective cycle of hustling and crashing. And so, sure, yes, take the time to rest, absolutely. But there may be a part of you that is pushing and pushing for a reason. And this reason may have helped you at some time in your life. For me, when I think about my youth, and what comes to mind more for me is high school, where I was in all honors classes and didn't know I had ADHD, but I would push and push. I would study 5 hours a night, which I thought was until really recently an indication of how hard my classes were. And yes, they were challenging classes. But what I realize now is the reason I had to study so long was because of my ADHD and I was pushing and pushing. And then I would crash. I remember coming home from college, every break, I would be sick because I had been pushing and pushing through finals week, and I'd come home and crash. I remember my mom complaining, "You're always sick when you come home," and that was why. And so this pattern worked for me for a while to be able to get through school and do well. But it's not working anymore, especially because now at 50, almost 51, I don't have the energy I did when I was 20 years old. I suspect you may be in the same boat. Plus, this has a way of catching up with us in the form of chronic illness. And so we want to make sure this is a pattern we're not doing anymore. But to do that, first, it takes recognizing that there's a reason something inside of us did this and that it really helped us for a while. Maybe even being grateful for the part of us that helped us through those times. of so much work that we didn't know what to do with, especially before we even knew we had ADHD and needed accommodations. The important thing is to recognize that this part did this to help you and that it's not bad or wrong for doing it. It's just that now it's not the most effective way to do what you're trying to do in your adult life, which is build a successful business with ADHD. To do that, to be an entrepreneur, to really build and grow a client-centric business with ADHD, one of the most important things is to have your energy be in alignment, to have yourself be grounded and connected and genuine. But you can't do that if you're in the cycle of pushing and hustling. You're going to come off as inauthentic because you're not actually grounded in yourself. You're grounded in the parts of you that are afraid of what will happen if you don't get it all done. And it's totally valid to feel that way and no longer working for you. And so the work here is getting to know these parts, what they're concerned would happen if you stopped the pushing and pushing. When I recently was doing this, I leaned in and got curious. I was like, okay, what's the concern that would happen if I all of a sudden stopped doing the webinars? Because I had said I would do more webinars in the month of January because people seemed to be enjoying them when they attended them. I just was not having the bandwidth for it. And I was like, okay, what am I afraid would happen? What am I really afraid would happen? And I was like, oh, okay, I won't have more people to serve in my program. But the thing is my webinars really haven't been bringing all that many people into my program right now anyway, because I'm tired and because I'm not able to give at the same capacity that I normally can. And so I decided to take a break. I decided to take a break from coaching in my program, the small group coaching, not the one-to-one that they get, but the small group coaching for a couple weeks to reset so I could also write the book that I'm writing, which I haven't really shared with anyone yet. So I guess it's kind of becoming public now that I'm in the process of creating a journal book experience that I need to get to my copywriter editor in January. And so I decided to take some time off to be able to get grounded and take care of myself and to do my morning writing more fully again, to really double down on my yoga practice and to lengthen the time of my meditation, to let myself rest in bed instead of feeling guilty about it when my kitties want to snuggle. Those things have allowed me to get grounded back into my energy and back into a place of serving and a desire to help. It's from that energy that I've been writing my book. And it's from that energy that I come to you today with this podcast. Because until we get our energy aligned, a lot of the work we do is probably not going to be all that useful anyway. So some of it is figuring out what are we afraid might happen and working with that. Sure, that fear was valid. I wasn't going to be able to do my webinars if I took a break. And I'm not. I'm taking a break from doing them all of January while I figure out what I want to do. I'm doing a cool new challenge instead, which you already had to sign up for by the time this came out. So by the time this episode comes out. But I'm doing a fun challenge in January to regulate your nervous system. And if it goes well, I may try it again in February. So keep an eye on your email inbox. And if you're not already in my email club, I'll put a link in the show notes so you can join it. And so you can be one of the first people signed up because I'm trying to keep those challenges relatively small so I can really help people with regulating their nervous system. But back to you. As you are working with the parts of you and as you start to understand their concern, see if you can do that from a place of curiosity and compassion and validating that, oh my gosh, you get how they got there. And then working with them on trying something different. Seeing if they would give you some space to get grounded in your own self again. And doing whatever it is you need to do that. I can't tell you how to get grounded in self energy for you. What I can tell you is what works for me. So I exercise every day. That's just something I've done. Oh my gosh, for sure since I went to college. But even when I was in high school, I either had dance cheerleading or I started running. Probably my sophomore year, I started running. Even back then, it was like a mile and a half a day because I would just go around Como Lake in St. Paul, Minnesota. But it was still getting movement in every single day. And that's been there. And I believe that actually significantly helps with my ability to be present and focus. But that's a staple. So I don't know how much that helps me when I'm in this cycle of pushing and pushing and hustling. What I do notice makes a huge difference because these are the practices that I tend to skimp on when I feel like my schedule is full and probably fuller than it should be, is my morning pages. I tend to write less and less. My meditation practice, instead of doing 15 minutes, I tend to get down around 7 or 8, sometimes even as low as 5 minutes, which isn't bad. To be clear, I'm not saying anyone who meditates for only 5 minutes is bad. I just know for me, I get more benefit when I meditate for 12 to 15 minutes. I just not that's why the only reason I meditate is to get benefit, but I notice I feel more grounded and centered into myself when I do that. When I do at least 5 minutes, but really between 10 and 15 minutes of yoga per day, I notice that I again feel so much more grounded into my self energy. I feel so much more present. And believe it or not, when that happens, I'm actually more productive than if I would have stepped into the hustle first thing in the morning. So I can recognize that it may be hard to step out of this pattern of pushing and pushing because you might have a part of you that's like, oh no, we got to do it. Otherwise, we won't get it done. But if you can lean in and get curious and work with this part on its concern and seeing if it would give you some space to maybe do some things to help you get more grounded, you might be able to actually be more productive with the amount of time you work, which might be less then, so that you can also rest and enjoy your life. I'm excited to hear how it went for you. So please share in the comments or shoot me an email. If you're not already in my email club, I'll put a link in the show notes so that you can sign up for that. You'll get at least one email a week. Sometimes it's more. Actually, I think it's 2 emails a week because you'll get one about the podcast and then one about the Friday email, mostly Friday email. Sometimes it's Saturday or Sunday, depending on how on top of things I am or if I'm letting go of my deadline. But you'll get at least 2 emails a week, and you can choose which emails you want. So if you decide you don't want the podcast email, for example, you can unsubscribe from just that. So you're welcome to join me there. I share lots of fun tidbits and, well, I think they're fun, and musings about ADHD and my experiences helping others so that can help you. So all right. Thank you for being here. And if you're not already, be sure to follow the Self Loved ADHD Woman Way podcast. And if you haven't yet, I would love it if you leave a review. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're like, I don't know how to leave a review, well, I did a very low budget video showing you how to leave a review on different options. And you can also find that in the show notes. It's legit me holding my phone as I navigate the review process on my iPad. So bear with me on that one. But I would love it if you left a review and shared anything that resonates. Take care.